In this video, we are going to review how to calculate the mean, median, mode, and range of a data set. And we are going to use, for a data set, a couple of different things, but we're going to start with the top 8 paying math careers. As you can see, you can make a pretty penny if you choose a career in mathematics. Take a second, please, to pause the video and write the learning target at the top of your notes page and write the numbers in the data set, and then restart the video and we'll be ready to go. For example number 1, we are going to find the mean of the set of data, and the mean is also frequently called the average. The average does technically cover some other measures as well, but typically when somebody mentions the word average, they're talking about the mean. And there is a 2-step process for how we find the mean. Step 1, we are going to calculate the sum of the data set, and sum is the mathematician word for the answer to an addition problem. So we're going to add all of those salaries together in order to find the mean or the average. So if we add all of these numbers together, we are going to get 844,240. So for the first step, we are going to calculate the sum. We are going to add all of those salaries together. And step 2, we are going to divide by the number of pieces of data. So what do I mean by that? So if I look up at my data set, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 pieces of data. So in this case, there are 8 salaries in our list of data. So we're going to take that 844,240, and we're going to divide and make sure that in math, in algebra, I know you're kind of used to, maybe from elementary school or math, you use the little division sign that looks like this. In algebra, we want to use this front slash or a fraction bar to represent division. So we're going to do 844,240, and we are going to divide it by 8 because there were 8 pieces of data in our data set. So that means that our average or our mean is 105,530. So that is how we find the mean. For example number 2, I'd like you to take a minute. I have a different set of data here. This time it's the top most followed celebrities on Insta so far in 2020. And even though these are technically in the millions, go ahead and just treat them as if they were, like when you're going through and you're finding the sum, just add together like 125.8, 129.5, and so on and so forth. Don't worry about the million part for right now. We'll add that at the end. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and try to find the mean of this data set. Before I give you the correct answer, I want to bring your attention to a very common mistake, which I've highlighted here when I said common wrong answer, which would be 1028.4. And if you look at that answer and then you look at the data set, it kind of makes sense. You could tell that, something must be wrong, because all of these are in the 100 millions. But then I got an answer that was over 1,000. So the reason, if you happen to get that answer, even if you didn't get that answer, please pay attention, because I've seen this mistake more times than I care to think about. This is why you got that answer. It means that when you were putting it into the calculator, you typed it in like this. You added everything. You put it all in, you added them all together, so you did like 100, and then the last one, 196. You didn't hit the equal sign. Instead, you just typed the division sign and then 8. And then what happens there is your calculator is smart. Your calculator knows to do order of operations. So what your calculator did is it did this division first, and then it added all the other stuff to that answer. So that is why you got the wrong answer. So it's really super important when you're finding the mean that you make sure that when you do step 1, when you add, make sure you remember to hit the enter button or the equal sign before you actually divide. All right, so now that I showed you what not to do, let me show you what you should have done. So for step 1, we should have found the sum. So in other words, we should have added all of those numbers of Instagram followers together. And when I did that, I got 1,199.9. So step 1, I added them all together. Step 2, I divided 1,199.9. I divided it by 8, because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different celebrities listed here. So that gave me a mean or an average of 149. I realized I dropped the ball and I didn't tell you how to round. So I'm just going to write exactly what it was. 9,875. So just your middle of the road average top Instagrammer has 149.9875 million, because we always like to add units, followers. I should note that typically we would round that to the nearest tenth. It's usually what and that's on the exit slip for this. That's actually what you'll do. So remember, this is the tenths place, and you look to see whether or not you round it up or down, and the way you do that is by looking at the number to the right. And because the number to the right is 5 or bigger, that means we would round the 9 up, which is also which will round that up to a 0, which will round this one up too. So if we did do some official rounding, it would be about 150 million. Whenever we estimate, we use a little squiggly equal sign there. So just thought I'd point that out to you, because that might be important at a later date. The next thing that we are going to, or measure we are going to find, is the median. So the median is a term for the middle number. Ooh, that was some ugly handwriting there. Let me try that again. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do is make sure that, because we can't just look and see what's in the middle of the list the way it's written right now. So we first have to put it in order from least to greatest. And this is the part where I even always mess up. So make sure you double check me, make sure I don't do that wrong. But I'm going to write these in order from least to greatest first. Okay, so I've gone and I've put them all in order from least to greatest. Notice to try to make sure that I don't mess anything up. I've actually gone through and like checked these off as I went through them to make sure that I didn't forget one. So now that I have them in order from least to greatest, I need to find the middle number. So let's take a look at that. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers. So there's not, it's half and half, right? There's not actually one median in the middle. So whenever we have two middle numbers, which in this case we do, and in this case those two middle numbers are 105,020. So I'm going to kind of color code that so that you know I'm talking about those two middle numbers. So what we need to do is we need to add them together. Sorry about that, guys. So I'm going to add 105,020 plus 108,350. So I'm going to add those two numbers together. And when I added those together, I got 213,370. So step 1, we're going to add those two middle numbers together. Step 2, we're going to divide by 2. So if I take those two numbers, add them together, divide by 2, that gives me $106,685. So just your, you're just middle of the road of the highly paid math careers is over $106,000. So that's pretty good, nah? Oops. For example number 2, I would like you to take just a second and pause the video and you try to find the median of this set of data. Okay, I'm going to assume that you have done that, so I am going to go ahead and work it for you. Step 1, putting them in order from least to greatest, is actually already done for us because you'll notice that the list starts with the smallest, highly paid, and then it moves up so that the largest is down here at the bottom. So I'm not going to spend the time rewriting these. I am going to see, okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. So again, there's not like one number that is right there in the middle. So remember what we need to do when we have two middle numbers. We had to add those two numbers together. So I'm going to add 144.1 plus 150.2. Okay, now I'd like you to have one last example where I've got the 11 most expensive pair of shoes. Pause the video for a minute, try to find the median. I'll be right back with you. So I'm going to assume that you have already located the median or attempted to locate the median. So this time, step 1, order from least to greatest. This is already in order from least to greatest, which is great. So I'm just going to count and see how many I've got. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which means that this time I have just one middle number. So when you only have one number in the middle, that is simply your median. So the median is $1.6 million. So somebody actually paid $1.6 million for those ruby slippers from the Wizard of Oz, actually. So just the middle of the road as far as the most expensive shoes in the world, the median is $1.6 million. Our next example is finding the mode, and the key idea for the mode here is the number. Oops, sorry about that, guys. That occurs the most. So if we look at our data set here, you see that we don't actually have a number that's repeated. Like there's one of each salary, right? So this one is actually one of those special cases. Okay, so this is our big idea because there's only one of each number. There is no mode. Be careful to make sure that you write the word no mode instead of zero. Sometimes people will write zero, which I get because you're saying there's zero modes. But if you write the number zero, you're basically saying that zero is the mode, if that makes sense. So make sure that you write no mode, not zero modes. Okay, example number 2. This is another one that is a little bit of a special case because if I look and I see that there's only one of these, only one of those, but there's 2 pairs of shoes that cost $1 million. Just one. But here I have 2 that cost $2 million. And then I also have 2 pairs of shoes that cost $3 million. So you can actually have more than one mode. So because there are 2 $1 million, there's 2 $2 million, and there are 2 $3 million. There are 3 modes. And again, those 3 modes are 1 million, 2 million, and 3 million. So the same way that you can have no modes, you can also have more than one mode. On that note, I'd like to bring your attention to a common mistake that a lot of people make. I'm going to write this response in red. Okay, red, you're going to learn, means wrong. Okay, so here's something that people have a tendency to do. They say, oh, well, I have 3 5s, but then I also have 2 3s. So 3 and 5 are modes. Okay, so in this case, that is not correct. Okay, because you want to look and see which one turns up the most often, okay? And the one that turns up the most is the number 5. So it's not that 3 and 5 are both modes. Remember, again, I wrote that because that's wrong. Okay, 5 is the only mode. I also want to turn your attention to one more common mistake. And a lot of people, again, red equals wrong. Okay. A lot of people think, oh, well, I've got 2 1s, I've got 2 2s, and I also have 2 3s. So the modes are 1, 2, and 3 because you have 2 of each one. And that is not correct either, okay? Because no number appears more than any other, right? You don't have one that turns up more than the others. They're all the same. You have 2 of each. So that means, so there is no mode in this case. You're not going to say they're all modes just because you've got more than one. Remember, the key is looking for which one turns up the most. And there isn't one that turns up more than the others, so therefore this is no mode. Okay, our last set of data, or I'm sorry, I meant to say our last measurement of data is something called the range. And in algebra, you might have heard a range talking about like domain and range. We're talking about the type of range that's in statistics. And the range is the difference between, and a key word here for difference, when you are talking about difference in math, you're talking about subtraction. That's when you're finding a difference. So the subtraction, so you're finding the difference between your highest and your lowest value. So our highest in this case would be, what is it? 122,220. And then we're going to subtract the lowest value. And in this case, the lowest value is going to be 85,660. Sorry guys, my text messages are like going off there. My fault. Okay, so we're going to subtract our highest and our lowest, which means that our range, so we're going to subtract our highest minus our lowest, which means that our range is going to be $36,560 is the range. Okay, so now for example 2, I'd like for you to pause the video and try to find the range of this data set. I am going to assume you've already done that yourself, so remember we need to do the highest minus the lowest. In this case, our highest value is 196 million. And we're going to subtract that from the lowest, which is 125.8 million. So after I do that subtraction, I got 70.2, oh, that's not a 2, that's a 7. So 70.2 million is the range.